So it's a quiet night tonight in the NHL. We've only got Montreal and Buffalo. Habs should win that. Rangers are in Washington. Washington's looking for the President's Trophy. But Kris Letang's out. And that hurts. And the fact he's out for 4 to 6 months means that the odds of Pittsburgh repeating as Stanley Cup champions just got a lot longer. There's a lot of depth on that blue line, but man, Letang, he showed in last year's Stanley Cup run that Letang really is a premier defenseman. He's a #1 guy. I know Schultz is able to put up the point totals, but in terms of all-around defenseman, Letang is one of the best. The other thing going around today, Giordano's knee-on-knee last night against Cam Fowler. I've watched it. I've watched it from a couple of angles. To me, it looks like a screw-up by Giordano. It doesn't look to me like a dirty knee-on-knee hit. And yet, you know, the #1 thing I usually look for if I'm looking at a knee-on-knee is, did he lock his knee? Did the guy who's delivering the knee-on-knee, did he lock it? Did he straighten his leg out completely and then go in for it? Because if you don't and your knee is out, then you could get injured as well. There have been certainly cases where it's been a knee-on-knee hit and both guys get hurt. And it's not an argument we have a lot in the NHL anymore. A lot of that knee-on-knee stuff seems to be out of the game. Now it's been replaced by cross-checks and crotch shots, like Marchand last night. But I don't think Giordano did anything that's suspension-worthy. Definitely a penalty. Definitely questionable. But Giordano was lucky he didn't get injured too. Well, till the fight after, but that didn't last very long either. But I honestly think if you're the Flames right now, your biggest concern is you don't want to be facing the Ducks in the first round. The Ducks could make very quick work of Calgary. Calgary cannot win in Anaheim. And I know regular season records don't really roll over into postseason. There's been plenty of cases where in the postseason you can just turn around your luck. I would not bet on Calgary doing that against Anaheim. It has been a complete and total one-sided ownership, just in terms of the results. And I'm not talking about games that are close and oh, Calgary should have won this one or that one. Those are going to happen. But just that many wins in a row. That many wins in a row is crazy. So there's that. The Giordano hit, I would love to sit and do a video and analyze it, but to me, there's nothing there. The NHL's already announced they won't have a hearing. Apparently, Brad Marchand's getting a hearing. Now, it's interesting. Tim and Sid today, for anybody who watched it, looked at the difference between the Sidney Crosby hit on O'Reilly and what Marchand did last night against Dotchin. And there's a difference. Crosby's was from behind, and it was more of a one-handed lift to the crotch. And Marchand's was a two-handed face-to-face right in the cojones. And the question then becomes, which one's dirtier? And it's funny because it's a valid question. O'Reilly didn't know it was coming. And I'm not saying that if you know that somebody's going to hit you in the nuts, it's going to hurt any less. The only thing you have to say to that is, don't hit me in the nuts. That's kind of a given. It was kind of like the guy's code. I remember no matter what sport I was playing with my friends or whoever, or was at school, and you'd see one guy just drill another guy in the nuts, and you go, you don't, there's a code. You don't do that. You know, and then girls would joke about, oh, I'm going to kick him, and you go, nah. Like, he could say, I'm going to slap him in the face. That's funny. I'm going to punch him in the stomach. That's funny. I'm going to kick him in the nuts. Hey, there are limits. Do not joke about kicking a man in the jewels. And, you know, we would sit girls down and explain how we as boys are, we go through special pain. And, of course, you know, we patronize even though we don't have to go through childbirth because, I don't. I really, really don't. I watched my son being born, and I just, no. But still, it doesn't mean that I'm going to line up for a nut-kicking contest, where I know I'm going to take a kick in the nuts. Rochambeau is not a game that I would want to play. But it's funny because Marchand getting a hearing is kind of news in and of itself, because I can't think of a time where somebody's been hit in the nuts with a stick and has been suspended. Not the guy who got hit, but the guy who did the hitting. I can't. I can't think of a time that's happened. And maybe I'm forgetting something. I mean, I remember McSorley, the headshot on Brashear. I remember lots of stick work that's been suspended, but I can't remember an incident. Sorry about that. I can't remember an incident where a guy's been hit below the belt and the other guy gets suspended for doing it. But it should be suspendable. It's one of the things you look at and you go, well, it should be suspendable. And when people say, well, he's wearing a cup, okay, well, people wear helmets, but headshots aren't legal. You know, and I remember I was talking with a friend of mine who was a junior A goalie in his younger years, and we were talking about a goalie getting hit in the nuts with a shot. And I don't remember if it was a McInnes shot. I think it was McInnes or Gary Suter. This is Gary Suter, not Ryan Suter. This is back in the 80s and 90s. And I said to him, I said, well, the goalie's wearing a cup, so it can't be that bad. And he said, it's like a bell, and it reverberates. He said it hums and it vibrates, and he said the whole area takes that shot. And I thought, that doesn't sound pleasurable. And when I saw Dotchin rolling around last night, I think what got me, and I think this is what will get Marchand suspended, if he crotched him and then skates away. Or if he crotched him and then went, crap, what was I doing? And he are you okay? Now Marchand's stick in the face, get up, you idiot. And then in the penalty box, you see him swearing, like, he's faking it. And then when the referee's like, no, you're out of the game. Are you serious? He's all ticked off, and it's like, I think for Marchand, if he'd shown some sort of contrition, some sort of, geez, I screwed up there. Like Sidney Crosby after the game against Buffalo, the Ryan O'Reilly hit. What kind of gets lost in that is, yeah, he crotched him, but he apologized to him after the game. Crosby knew he'd screwed up, and he approached Ryan O'Reilly after the game and said, I'm sorry. That to me is big. And for all the talk about whether or not Crosby's a dirty player, the fact that he is willing to go to a guy and go, I really shouldn't have done that, I'm sorry. That's big. Marchand doesn't seem to have that sort of conscience. He does things, and then he goes, well, I did that. That's done. Get up. Come on, you wuss. And then Marchand's the kind of guy, too, that if he'd stayed in the game, and if somebody in the Tampa lineup had challenged him to a fight, I could have seen him turtling. That's why people say, oh, we need a George Peros in the game. We need a big tough guy like a Brashear in the game to police this. It doesn't work. Because if you put the big tough guy on the ice to beat the guy up, he'll usually turtle. Giordano stood up for himself last night. I mean, yeah, he got his clock cleaned, but he stood up for himself. But a guy like this, he'll turtle. And I say that as a Bruins fan who's very conflicted as a Bruins fan when I see that stuff going on. And I am. I see this and I'm like, oh, I can't cheer for that. It's tough. It really is. It is hard to cheer for a player that you know plays like that. And it's why there's certain players in the league that I'm like, I don't know how people can cheer for him. And it's funny because, you know, I take a lot of shots at Ryan Kesler, but I can understand why people would cheer for him. I can. Kessler's tough as nails. He's very good at getting the other team off its game. If he has to fight, he can. And he will. And he's a faker when it comes to injuries. And he's got that mouth, and he likes to beak off a lot. But I can understand why people like him. I can understand it. Whether I agree with it or not, that's something completely different. I don't really agree with it, but I can understand why somebody would like Ryan Kesler. But Marchand, and I say this as a Bruins fan, is really hard. It is hard for me from day in and day out to like what Marchand does. And I think that's why Giordano, it's a knee on knee. It's a questionable hit. It's a penalty. I don't see it as a suspension. Clearly, neither did the NHL. Marchand, if he crotches the guy and skates away, shows some contrition, says, geez, I screwed up there, he probably doesn't get a call from the NHL. But his behavior after is troubling. And I think this is where the NHL needs to take some ownership of this. They let him get away with 2 trips earlier this year that should have been at least fines or something. And they went, no, we don't see anything here that's suspendable. They already made it so that Marchand feels like he doesn't have to worry. Like he's got leeway here. He's got certain sway. And he shouldn't feel that way. And so the NHL may come down on Marchand now because of the ones earlier in the season that they should have and didn't. So I wouldn't be surprised if this goes into the playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's one game. I honestly at this point don't know what to expect from the NHL. I'm not, even as a Bruins fan, I'm not going to be upset if he's out for 4 or 5 games because and that would include playoff games. It makes it hard. It does. It makes it hard. So here's the thing. We're all hockey fans. We've all got our favorite teams. Which player on your team, currently or in the past, can you look at, and if you're a Rangers fan, the answer is Sean Avery. Can you look at and say, I love my team, but it was really hard to cheer for Sean Avery? And that would be for Red Wings, Kings, I know as a Stars fan, Rangers. Hard to cheer for a guy when he's standing in front of the other team's goalie and going. And again, that wasn't against the rules. The NHL sat down and went, okay, so Avery's an idiot, but we don't have it in the rules. You can't be an idiot. How do we make it so it's against the rules to be an idiot? Anybody ideas? We'll call that interference? Sure. All right. Can we agree that Sean Avery needs to be gone? Yeah, we agree. All right, good. All right, done. So there you go. And I guess that's another thing too. If you can get suspended for hitting a guy in the crotch, does that matter? There's another question for you guys. Does it matter to you after a player does something like that? So whether it's a knee-on-knee hit or crotching a guy, does it matter if the player who was guilty of the offense shows any kind of contrition after, feels bad after, goes and checks on the player after it happens? Or, you see him actually go over to the guy and go, sorry about that. Does that matter? Should that matter in the NHL's decision-making process? Or should it just be the incident itself that matters? Because I think that's where we're at with Marchand. I think it's his attitude after that could influence whether or not he gets a massive suspension here. Because the incident itself, to me, doesn't seem like something that's a massive suspension. Because Crosby wasn't even called in for a hearing over O'Reilly that I can remember. I'm pretty sure he wasn't. And I remember Buffalo fans were not happy. Non-Crosby fans were not happy. So right now, those people are really not happy. So is that part of the game here? Is that part of what's going on here? Is it the gentleman's agreement that when something ungentlemanly happens, you will admit it to one another, look each other in the eye, and say, I'm sorry, this shouldn't have happened. I apologize. And you go from there. Let me know what you guys think. If you're just browsing your way through, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. I talk about hockey every day, numerous videos per day, lots of different jerseys. I ordered another one today. Lids.com right now, no, lids.ca right now. So if you're in Canada, 30% off on all clearance merchandise. So I jumped in and I grabbed myself, and I really hope I get it this time because it's the second time I've ordered it. The Winnipeg Jets Heritage Classic jersey. It has Dustin Byfuglien's name and number on the back. And I really hope I get it. I'm really, really hoping I get it. And I ordered myself 2 hats. Somebody asked me if I was going to do a hat video. I am considering it. As you can see from the door there, there's hats just everywhere. It's just hats. There's over 50 of them, I know that. I will probably rank my favorites, but that's coming up soon. I'm going to do a power rankings tonight, because we are 1 week today from the playoffs. So I want to do a power rankings tonight as the last power rankings before the playoffs. And then a week from tonight, I can do 1 through 16 for the playoffs. This will be the last time I do a power ranking of teams that are missing the playoffs. So stay tuned for that. Until then, enjoy the 2 hockey games that are on. And let me know what you think about the video that I just showed you now. I will talk to you all again soon.